This is the Dzogchen Sunday Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. It is Kwai Gong Jin early Thursday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi. After we explore exactly how to do that. Why do so many mythologies explore a fall from grace? Why have historians showed us that humanity's practice of spiritual matriarchy mutated into religious patriarchy, or that our practice of proto-Buddhism transformed into institutional Buddhism? How did that happen? Approximately 300,000 years ago, our Paleolithic ancestors enjoyed a proto-communistic culture that conditioned them to be flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. And that was beautiful. But it only lasted about 290,000 years. After which, our Neolithic ancestors endured the rise of proto-capitalism that took human values and put them on their head, turned them on their head, conditioning our culture to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. That's why Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, and only a paltry 10% are interested in Yin's spiritual matriarchy. The profound momentum of Yang's religious patriarchy infects every area of our life, convincing us to overfocus and overanalyze to the point of so exhausting both our dorsolateral and medial prefrontal cortici that we trigger our amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression. However, when we passively cooperate with the core of our autonomic nervous system, which is our spinal cord, the anxiety and aggression of our amygdala is calmed, and the empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus is gently stimulated, as is our peace. This autonomic nervous system, it can be thought of as having two dimensions. We'll explore the first dimension under the guise of mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access the core of our sympathetic nervous system, which has evolved to notice in a very special way. It has evolved to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice all mind's antics of perception. You know, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and the like, including the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, cognitions, recollections, and imaginings. All of them, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious. to the grotesque. But what are we to do with that which we noticed? A one-word cryptic answer could be meditation. You see, every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access both the tippy top as well as the very bottom of that same spinal cord. These two extremes, working as a team, have evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release during our exhalation to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, and less defining. In fact, as well as non-graspable as a vast empty void. The wealth of the preposition as infers this is a simile, and a simile is only as effective as it is relatable. Therefore, we have to ask the question, what? What is a real-world example of a non-graspable, vast empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn? We can take a nice big blanket, set it on the grass, and lay down upon it, facing the sky, reaching up with splayed fingers, grabbing at that infinite azure, and pulling our hands back to our face, only opening them to see there is not a trace of blue. The sky remains intact, unable to be grasped by us terrestrial humans. What a wonderful, visceral example of something being appearing, yet non-graspable. But what about the idea of no self? Well, the more rigid we are, the more we're going to interpret that literally. But if we are fortunate enough to wake up and remember that, and be flexible enough to remember that words can mean more than one thing, then it would work like this. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever label or sense of self we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even as non-graspable as a vast empty void. Is this permanent? No, this is fleeting, and only lasts until our next inhalation when the cycle begins again. So we do not meditate to become defined purely by emptiness. We meditate as a form of neurological hygiene, to take a relaxing break from the exhausting habit of actively competing against our autonomic nervous system, and instead spend a moment or two passively cooperating with it. This autonomic nervous system, which the ancients nicknamed the Tathagata or Buddha nature. Let us now shift gears. For the remainder of this morning's live stream, let us sit as sustainably as we can, breathing and noticing and relaxing. We silently and mentally recite the verb noticing as we feel our diaphragm pull down, and we silently and mentally recite the verb relaxing as we feel our diaphragm reset. These verbs are not magic. They do not force our autonomic nervous system to notice and relax. Why not? Because that is unnecessary. Our autonomic nervous system is always noticing and relaxing in coordination with our breathing. The only variable is whether or not we are tuned into that, whether or not we are cooperating with that. Our autonomic nervous system is like an app on our smartphone running in the background. We simply play with these two verbs of noticing and relaxing to remind our will to cooperate passively. It is a mistake to play with our real or imagined subtle energy in an effort to chase trance, but it can be useful to work with our energy in order to sit sustainably. There are many ways we can do that. We can adjust our respiratory frame of reference, noticing air passing through our nostrils or through our chest, or through our nostrils, through our chest, or through our diaphragm as we breathe. Additionally, we can play with our fingers. We could play with our index fingers. We could play with all four fingers. We could play with our middle finger. We could play with our ring finger, and we could play with our little finger. Let's start with our little finger. We could use the tip of our left little finger to support the lower knuckle of our right little finger, palms up in our lap. The free fall of mindfulness and meditation can agitate our controlling tendencies and cause us to fear that if we blink our eyes, we'll open them to find that a century has passed us by. A useful workaround is playing with a variation of Bengali crease counting. In addition to using our left hand's pinky to support our right hand's pinky, we can use our left hand's thumb in a very special way. We could touch our left hand's thumb to the lower set of creases on its little finger, the same one that's supporting our right hand, and that way keep track of our first set of 12 inhalations. The actual inhalations could be counted using the thumb of our right hand. Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb noticing during our inhalation, we can advance our thumb across the sets of creases found on the underside of our fingers. Together, let us practice as a team for about a minute. Behold, our right thumb has run out of finger creases upon which to count. Therefore, we return our attention to our left thumb and advance it to the next set of creases. And now you get the basic idea of how we could count 12 sets of 12 inhalations each, which takes about 12 minutes. If you wish to meditate longer than 12 minutes, then we can keep track of our collections of 12 sets of 12 inhalations by playing with the knuckles of our hands in various ways. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window. This might be an excellent time to remind you that according to Proto-Buddhism, enlightenment is nothing more than mastering the Buddha's Eightfold Path. But what do we mean by master? We master anything when we get so good at it that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. As children, we mastered using the toilet instead of our diapers. We mastered brushing our teeth, tying our shoes, riding a bike, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But did you know there was a way to master the Eightfold Path in as little as 7 days? The more we play, the more we authentically train in mindfulness and meditation, the more we automatically enhance our experience of impermanence, no self, and emptiness, the more we cannot help but bring the mental, the interpersonal, the physical, and the circumstantial into the path of kind intention, kind communication, kind conduct, kind commerce, the essence of all morality. The more we authentically play with mindfulness and meditation, the more our choices, utterances, and deeds flow, not from contrived calculations, not from wild scatteredness, but from love's deeply centered spontaneity, which is known by many names, including right effort, or effortless effort, or doing without doing, or wu wei, or going with the flow, or being in the zone, or expedient means. So it turns out that authentic mindfulness and meditation is the dynamo that generates the effortless mastery of the remaining six folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. That is why the Buddha explained in the second to the last passage of his discourse on the four bases of mindfulness that one could master his path in as little as 7 days. Let us switch gears to invite our subtle energies to coalesce at our crown in a manner that helps us to sit up nice and tall. As we feel air enter our nostrils, we can silently and mentally recite the verb noticing. And as we feel air exit our nostrils, we can silently and mentally recite the verb relaxing. We can also adjust our fingers. Instead of working with our little fingers, we can work with our index fingers, using the tip of our left index finger to support the lower knuckle of our right index finger, palms up in our lap, while we count 12 sets of 12 inhalations each. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation or philosophy, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 6 minutes or so. Let us switch gears and subtly invite our real or imagined subtle energies to coalesce at our chest. Every time we feel our chest gently swell as we inhale, silently and mentally we could recite the verb noticing. Every time we feel our chest subtly sink as gently we exhale, we could silently and mentally recite the verb relaxing. But what about our fingers? We could use the tip of our left middle finger to support the lower knuckle of our right middle finger, palms up in our lap. As we count 12 sets of 12 inhalations each. And remember, the moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 6 minutes or so. checking for questions. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. For Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers just like you. In approximately 10 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's dusk explanation and group practice of meditating like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.